Okay, welcome everyone to another Ask the Professionals. Very excited about this one. It follows on from a couple of initial Ask the Professionals around embedding accessibility and standards and processes. And this one, we're going to go quite into a bit more detail of practical tips and tricks of embedding accessibility. So to get us started, I'm just going to do an acknowledgement of country. I would like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal and the Ngambri people, who are the traditional custodians of the land here in Canberra, where I am today, and pay respect to the elders of both past and present. And I extend this respect to all Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander people in attendance today. And feel free to put in the chat your name, where you're paying your respects from, if it's in Australia or overseas, up to you, in the chat, and we can we'll get started with our panelists today. My name is Bree Norton. I'm co-chair of OZeWAI, and I'm really happy to be moderating this session today. Embedding accessibility earlier is such a big passion of mine. I'm also, I work for a company called AbilityWorks in Melbourne, where we mentor people in our inclusive design team, and we work with, co-facilitate with people with disability in workshops and training as well. So that's a little bit about me. I'm actually going to hand it over to Juanita now. If you could please do a little intro, and then we'll go around to everyone else. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Juanita Flessis. I am from the US, if you can't hear from my accent. But I just moved to Australia in May, and I currently work as an education manager for the Australian Teachers of Media, and also have my business Empower Accessibility. And I was the former head of accessibility at Navy Federal Credit Union.
Thanks, Juanita. You bring such a wonderful background, and we are also pleased to have Juanita on our committee for OZeWAI as well, so which we're very excited about. Zoe, would you like to do a little intro for us too, please?
Sure. Great to be here. I'm Zoe Horton. As you can probably tell from my accent, I'm not Australian either. Originally from the UK, but been over this side of the world for a little bit over 10 years now. I'm currently working in the banking industry as a senior accessibility manager, so helping squads and teams to deliver accessible and inclusive products. Yeah, I've been in the accessibility industry for well over 10 years now, and it's a great space to work in, and I'm really happy to be here and share knowledge.
Excellent. Thanks, Zoe. And Jun, please, if you'd like to do an intro for us.
Hi, I'm June. As you can probably hear from my accent, I'm not here. I'm not Australian either. I'm originally from the Philippines, and I moved to Australia in 2015. I'm currently the accessibility specialist at Moodle HQ's products group, and I'm relatively new to the role, having transitioned to it in April of this year. Previously, I was primarily involved in the development of the open source Moodle Learning Management System, or LMS. Before I formally transitioned to the accessibility specialist role, I had been working on helping Moodle LMS achieve WCAG level AA conformance since we launched our annual accessibility audit initiative in 2020. So I'm the main point of contact between Moodle and our audit provider, GrackleDocs, where I set up our demo sites and that we use for the audit, and I organize work as well among our teams to resolve any accessibility issues identified during the audit. So over the past 5 years, I have gained more experience in accessibility and a greater appreciation for the importance of making Moodle's products accessible and usable to everyone, particularly to people with disabilities.
That's great,
So
Jun.
yeah, I believe that making Moodle's products accessible is crucial to help achieve its goal of empowering educators to improve our world.
That's brilliant. Thank you. And you've kind of touched into my first question here is, a bit about your role, which you've done, and why is accessibility important to you, Jun?
Yeah, basically, Moodle supports goal number 4 of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which is to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. So, and I love Moodle, and I want to to make sure that Moodle is available for and usable for everyone, especially to people with disabilities. So
That's great. Thank you. And Zoe, why is accessibility important to you?
Lots of reasons. Yeah, so my introduction into accessibility was via I was high school teaching at the time and got to see firsthand the barriers that kids in schools faced if they had disabilities. So that was kind of like the first light bulb moment for me, and kind of inspired me to want to do anything I could to make a difference. So then I moved into accessibility space full time at the Blind Foundation in New Zealand. And again, that was really eye-opening, just seeing how blind and low vision users have to navigate digital products in order to access the content. So I suppose seeing those barriers firsthand really kind of motivated me to want to try and do anything that I could to make little changes and to raise awareness of these barriers. And then on a more personal level, I do have quite a lot of family who have disabilities, and I'm also aging, as we all are. And so, yeah, just lived experience of things that happen when you age, as you age. And yeah, so I often try and impress on people that, when we are addressing accessibility and trying to embed accessibility into products, ultimately we're benefiting ourselves, because we all need accessible products, no matter who we are.
That's excellent. Great background and summary too. And Juanita, so why is accessibility important to you?
Well, I started my career, I'm a lawyer, and I wanted to be a human rights lawyer, but then learned the hard way that the only one who really does that in the US is some asylum attorneys, and then there's Amal Clooney, who's probably the biggest figure in doing human rights law right now. So it's not, it just wasn't practical at the time. But I always wanted to dedicate my career to human rights, and I learned how to code later, and so I was really interested in tech and the intersection of tech and human rights. And so when I sort of found accessibility, it was a combination of all of that. And I thought that this is where I could sort of make the difference I want to make in the world. And that's why I also started Globally, which is through Accessible Community. It's going to create the world's first accessibility focused coding bootcamp and it's going to be made for free to folks with disabilities in the Global South. So really just trying to, as much as I can throughout my career, use it to push and propel people forward.
That's great. Thanks, Juanita. And just love to hear our backgrounds around that, and why it's important, and to hear that from you. But we've got a specific topic today, and those who are on the call, please, if you have a question around embedding accessibility, I think we're probably going to cover some of your questions. But if you'd like to put it in the chat, we'll come back and see if it actually matches up with what we think the questions would be. We've got some prepared, so we're going to get started. And the first one, I think I might go to you, Juanita, is a little bit about the question around where does accessibility sit in an organization? What kind of experience have you had in the different organizations that you're in that you think it worked well? So if you'd like to go first, Juanita.
Definitely. So sometimes people put it in like the compliance and legal department, and it's powerful there for a couple of reasons, because then you have the backing of that compliance arm, and the thing is very powerful in an organization. Another good spot for it would be technology governance. And I saw some power that you can have around procurement practices and such, and bringing technology into an organization's architecture through having it in that leg of the organization. Also, another place I see it do well is either in development, in the development space, or in, if you have a unified design system team, having accessibility embedded there as well. And I recommend that everybody get a design system with a component library, and because that would actually bound your accessibility issues to those components and such. And then you have accessible Legos you can play with and make, great experiences for your users. So there are different places and they have different strengths. I think probably the best one is not necessarily where it is in an organization. It's how much autonomy you give to the team, and how much the team is able to actually take their authority that they've been given, and also persuasion power to kind of make a difference. So it can really sit anywhere, but if you have those two things there, you have some authority given to it, and you have a team that can persuade, you can really make a difference, even if it's not in, quote, the right spot at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Zoe, where have you seen it work well? And what kind of a environment are you in now, if you're happy to share, or otherwise just, where have you seen it work well where accessibility sits within the organization?
Yeah, similar to Juanita, I think that it's hard to define one specific space. And so I would say that having like top down, grassroots level up approach is always kind of the most effective. In terms of where it sits, I think it's probably more important to state how it's communicated across an organization as well, because it can be sat in a space where it's powerful, but unless that's communicated across the organization, it's kind of a little bit siloed.
Yeah.
So I have seen it work really well where there is that top-down level, bottom-up approach, and the communications are widely available and accessible across the organization. Also, what Juanita was saying about design systems, having an accessible design system within the development space and design space is a fantastic resource to make sure that you're starting off with the accessible building blocks. It's not necessarily a guarantee that you're going to have accessible products and features, but it's a great start and a kind of guarantee that you're not going to be reintroducing inaccessible features by going rogue and creating custom components. So I've seen that works fantastically well.
Yeah, and there needs to be some kind of governance approach around, identifying what needs to go in those design systems and, testing as you go with that accessibility lens. So, why reinvent the wheel when you've got something that you can reuse? And it's also good for branding, right? You have a consistency across a lot of things, and you can focus on maybe some of the more fun stuff, to support the visuals maybe around it, rather than spending time, dealing with code that's inconsistent, or, designs that are inconsistent as well. So Jun, how do you do it at Moodle? Where does the access, is it yourself? Do you have a team? How do you see it working at Moodle, that you've got a driver to accessibility in your organization?
Well, first and foremost, I believe that accessibility is a shared responsibility. So I think that in every part of the organization, there should be something that advocates for accessibility, or accessibility is being considered. For example, in leadership, we must be supporting leadership must support accessibility initiatives within the organization to ensure that a sufficient budget is allocated for accessibility. And product development teams must embed accessibility throughout the development process, starting from design to development to QA. And at Moodle, we are working to ensure that accessibility is also a priority. So just like how we prioritize the security of the Moodle platform. But there's still a lot of work to be done. But
Yeah.
I aspire to build a culture of accessibility within the product teams and eventually throughout the organization.
Yeah, and I guess if you've got to the stage where you've got the leadership buy-in, which is our next question here, is like, how do you get that? How did you get that at Moodle? Like, obviously you talked about sustainability goals. So policy at that leadership level is important, and then maybe linking it back to it. Is that the kind of approach, or was it because you know that more people needed to use it? What was some of the things that drove the leadership to understand the buy-in for accessibility?
Um, well, first, we didn't really have to get a buy-in for accessibility. It's that our leadership already backs our commitment to accessibility, which is a good thing. And yeah, in case of Moodle, it's born out of necessity because
Hmm.
we have Moodle partners and we have a commercial services arm who provides who basically sell Moodle services, and a lot of our clients increasingly require formal accessibility conformance. So we had to make sure that to formalize our efforts in terms of accessibility by by launching the accessibility audits program
Oh, you've frozen a little bit. Oh, sorry. There we go.
initiative. So
Yeah. No, that's great, right? It's if people start asking for
sorry.
more accessible products, that's the driver. And
Yeah.
I'll go to you, Anita, about that because you did a lot of procurement work in the Navy Credit Union, which you talked to, obviously in one of our other us professionals. What about you? How did you get leadership buy-in in the teams that you had there? What was some of the tips that people can take away in how to make sure that their leaders are actually, have accessibility in their mind all the time?
So you have to have basically a case bank, and you have to pull out your case for a particular person that you're talking to. So if you're talking to like a CTO and such, if anybody wants to make automation or AI a thing at their organization, having quality code that's accessible, actually helps with that mission. So if you really do want to, build up a good QA practice that has a CI/CD pipeline that embeds all sorts of different kinds of checks and quality control and such. The only way to really do that is to have code that is able to be easily parsed by different technologies.
Yeah.
And if you have code that's like different on each page and such, the actual amount of work you need to do to maintain all of those test cases and such is quite a bit. So if you actually want to have an efficient QA operation, a QA automation operation, you want accessible code. If you want if you want to integrate AI, well, things that are accessible are more easily read by AI, agentic AI and such. So it makes more sense having a great accessibility program for somebody who's in the business side is just cheaper and it's also more efficient. You could save just per issue that makes it to production, you're spending $2,400. That's USD, and that's really a conservative estimate. So you take that and you multiply it across at scale. That's hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, depending on the size of your applications, and you could be saving that by embedding accessibility, an accessibility engineer at the very beginning stages of your development process, to somebody who's focused on the legal and compliant aspects. There's a lot of laws around the world that require accessibility, and though if you are worried about actual litigation and that risk is low, the risk of actually having somebody send a demand letter is a bit higher, and you have to respond to that, and that takes away costs and your resources from the organization. So and other people be motivated by the fact that it's just the right thing to do, or or it opens up new markets. So you really just kind of have to have these cases ready, and you have to make them in different ways to different people, and have a really great marketing strategy across your organization to really get that buy-in horizontally and vertically.
Yeah, no, that's great. And Zoe, what about you, about leadership buy-in? How do you see that kind of playing out?
Yeah, I love the idea of having a bank of cases because different stakeholders have different motivations to buy in. But some of the things that I've kind of seen work is obviously like the legal risk, brand reputation, just highlighting, the effects that can have. Business case, obviously giving hard facts and figures to savings and ROI. Also, presenting facts on the cost of not addressing and embedding accessibility. And I always really like WebAIM's pyramid of the motivation of change, because the least motivating is kind of the risk and the risk sector. Presenting that it's something that people feel they're forced to do, but the further you go up, the more sustained that motivation is to change. I'll probably share that in the chat, but I always like to refer to that. I'll put it in there now.
And look, I think there's we were Juanita and I were at UX Australia the last couple of days, and there, this idea of talk the language, talk the language of other people, understand what their language is, like the business side of things. There was a lot of talk about don't talk about UX and it's not good for the user. Kind of link it to business strategies and things like that. It's the same for accessibility. Totally think that's worthwhile. Do a little bit of homework and find out what the business strategy is, and put some data and facts up there, and to drive it and link it to that accessibility around all those things. The cost, money's always a big one, right? No one's just going to throw this money away if they really understand that it's it can happen like that if you don't consider accessibility earlier on. So I might move to a little bit of a general one around accessibility policies, standards, and frameworks. And you kind of see it that we have in Australia that we should, for procurement, our Australian human rights guidelines have been updated recently. Talks about accessibility in procurement, talks about accessibility in building products from the start as well. What kind of things should people put in maybe an accessibility policy, that they understand the standards and the frameworks that they should consider, and besides the design system, which is of course brilliant. So maybe Jun, did you want to share a little bit? Do you have an accessibility policy or something that you kind of come back to regularly?
In terms of accessibility policy, formally not yet, but we aim to always refer to to follow the WCAG 2.2 level W standards, and of course the ARIA standards. So we also produce in Moodle. We also produce a PDF. I think one PDF. So I think one thing we can focus on for future is to ensure that our PDFs are accessible. So yeah, there's still much work to do.
There's still a lot of work, and it's never done, right? Yeah. What about you, Zoe? What do you think in the kind of policies, frameworks? Is there something within organisations that you've seen that kind of really do get that driver and help get that buy-in as well when you actually start to reference those things?
Yeah, I think having clear references to the standards that like nationally that we need to adhere to, as well as like accessible procurement. So having detailed resources and links to those as guidance, that really helps drive home, any kind of internal policy, and linking that to like internal guidelines and practices and strategies that there are. So just making sure it's clear available, well communicated, and accessible.
Yes,
Accessible,
yeah, exactly. Make sure that,
ironic.
yeah. Nothing like throwing out a PDF that's not accessible and about accessibility policy. Yeah, it's not a good idea. You need to do it from your own point of view as well. Anything that you try and do for your organization, try and make it as accessible as possible, and then people will learn from that. What about you, Anita? What do you think? How can people bring in some of the standards and into their own policies, maybe in an organization?
Well, you have to have a multifaceted approach because accessibility isn't just something that lives on product teams. It's something that has to be embedded throughout the organization. So customer service will need a protocol. You'll need to have procurement folks understand when to involve accessibility engineers to actually review vendors and verify VPATs and such. And you'll need to actually have a monitoring framework for that. You need to actually have things for social media folks so that they understand what they need to do on each platform to create accessible content for your instructional designers, because if training isn't accessible in the US, that could be employment discrimination. There have been some cases in recent years against software companies that have provided tools that folks have to use in their employment, and so training could be another area. Probably not in the next few years, but it's something to watch out for. Also, you also obviously have to have different protocols for developers versus testers. I mean, and clearly define what those roles are. So an accessibility engineer should be an actual developer, and they should engage the team and actually code alongside developers to create accessible products. Choose when to use native HTML versus ARIA versus which components in a mobile framework that you're using versus using native, and kind of deliver on that. And then you have your automation folks as well, what kind of tools you integrate and how do you maintain those test cases and all of that. So it's really multifaceted. And you really have to have a fleshed out policy for each, I'd say. And that sounds like a lot, and it is. But the thing is, if you kind of go in with a grand strategy and kind of build things out over time, it really does work very well, because you do have people in the right places doing the right things.
No, that's great. And Zoe, with this, we'll move into a little bit more about training for these different roles. What kind of good training tips and tricks could you share? Zoe, did you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Passionate subject I'm passionate about, training. So I think, having role-based training, but also permanently available checklists that are applicable to each role, so that there's a central source of truth that the different roles can turn to know what's required for them to embed and design, develop, test for accessibility. So making sure that that's there available, and as part of the definition of done.
Yeah.
So that's really important. I've seen that that's key in being successful in embedding accessibility. So those are the checklists, but then obviously ongoing training is required. And what I've seen doesn't work is where you have like a really good impetus and it's gaining traction within a team. But then obviously organizations are fluid. There's lots of turnover, staff turnover. And so often if that isn't deeply embedded in to the organization, that knowledge and awareness and skill, it's left. When people move, it's lost. And so ways to prevent that happening is having an ongoing permanently available training program, preferably online, that staff and team members and leaders within the organization can avail themselves of. And it needs to be specific to each person's role. Having the training as well as part of the onboarding experience for when new staff arrive, that's really a really great way of making sure that the awareness is there from the beginning and the requirements. And yeah, definitely in terms of training and upskilling just on the basic requirements for accessibility. And it starts that onboarding journey off, starts off the way you intend it to be, basically.
Yeah, no, and it's one of those things that if you get it right and you put it in your job descriptions for those roles, you get an idea of like you can put it then into their, if they don't have as much of that knowledge, all right, well, this is the training you need. It's not going to stop you, but we're going to need you to learn this. It's a new skill that you'll need to pick up. So having it in the job descriptions, allows people to start thinking, oh, I have to learn that even before I go into the onboarding. What is available, that kind of thing. And just watch this space, because OZeWAI, we are planning a workshop on how to develop your own in-house accessibility training. So we're going to kind of provide a template aspect to it, and you can kind of put the details in that you need, but some of this is obviously coming from the team here as well. Jun, do you have training for people in Moodle as well, in how to make sure that they learn about accessibility for different roles?
Well, we have budget for accessing that we can use for to upskill ourselves in terms of accessibility. We also became a member of the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, or IAAP, in June. So we have a number of slots that that are available for our team members to avail of IAAP's accessibility courses. And yeah, and aside from that, I think it's also in my next project to create a training plan for a training session for various roles. But I think in my mind it would go like a session about that covers a more general session about general understanding of accessibility, disabilities, why it matters, and the benefits it can bring to the organization. And yeah, I think it's essential for everyone to have a good understanding of that aspect. And then I'm thinking of tailoring sessions for with focus for each role. For example, for designers, a training that focuses on accessible design principles, or color contrast, or keyboard navigation, and creating inclusive experiences would be something good, I think. For developers, I think I'm thinking of focusing on implementing coding best practices to create accessible interfaces and utilize accessibility tools to test for accessibility. And for our QA testers, I think I'm thinking of making a session about acquiring skills to evaluate the accessibility of the features that they are testing, not just the functionality. So such skills should include learning how to use screen readers, utilizing browser developer tools to browse the accessibility tree, or use Axe or Wave, and test the responsiveness of the page as well. So something like that.
And I guess getting to the QA stage, if you do it right earlier, it should be like a quick pass for them, right? It should make their job easier. They should have a similar approach. Juanita, do you have some kind of tips and tricks around training for roles, or training for organizations?
Yeah, I actually have a role-based training list of all like the free options out there, and I'll share that with you, Bree. You can share it with the larger
Thank
group.
you.
So there's a lot of free training out there, but also I want to say that training does not replace the fact that you need accessibility folks in those roles, folks that have that expertise. Because I think a lot of managers, what they tend to do is they tend to invest a lot in training, thinking that they're going to somehow upskill their team to be able to do accessibility, and it doesn't work because training doesn't scale like that. As somebody had mentioned during a conference at some point. So it just, you would have too much turnover and it takes too much time. I was talking to a company and they actually did have a successful model for training accessibility engineers, but it took a year and a half and it was their full-time job. And so you'd really, if you're not ready to make that kind of investment, it's easier to hire accessibility talent in and, give folks training so they understand their responsibilities, but also lean in on the expertise that you're building in your organization, by bringing those folks in.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I might stay with you, Juanita, around a little bit more, and I'm going to bring in more the usability aspects of bringing into embedding projects now. A couple of years ago, Andrew Arch and I ran a workshop at PWAC and asked people where would you, as part of a project process, we use the digital service standards, service design and delivery process, where would you want to bring in people with disabilities to be involved in that project? I'm just going to put the link in the chat to that. But how do you see that? That was kind of a summary of that workshop. How do you see, what's the approach that you took or you've seen that works well in ensuring that you've got people with disability involved as well in validating? WCAG is the baseline, but then you also want to be doing testing or research and then testing as well, don't you?
Yes. So I'd approach this in 4 different ways. One, you should have an advisory committee of folks with disabilities who help direct products, the direction of products. You should really be listening to feedback from that community. Just guiding as a guiding principle when you're making products for customers. Second, I would also have an ERG you can lean on, so you're listening to your employees with disabilities within your own organization. Third, I would do user research for folks with disabilities for new features and mock prototypes and such that you're developing to see if you're going in a good direction, regardless of whether or not it meets WCAG. Just getting that user feedback from a diverse array of people. And then I would have them at the UAT testing stage, because folks with disabilities are like any other stakeholder and should be involved in the final sign off and delivery of any product.
No, that's great. Great steps there, the four ways. Zoe, do you have an approach as well? What have you seen works well to make sure that you're bringing in people with disability at the right time and not overloading them either, overwhelming them?
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, users with disability, they should be driving this.
Yes.
I read a great article from Derek Featherstone about that. Basically, 5 levels of accessibility that he described. I'll share the link in the chat. But ideally, they should be driving it, but at the very least, involved right at design stage. So almost like co-design with users with disability. Far too often, we see it's just addressed at the end, like a sign off kind of thing, or let's check that this is okay with users with disability, instead of involving them right at the beginning, which could have provided a lot of enlightenment, like Juanita mentioned, and Jun, that it's not always just about compliance. There's been far too many times where I've observed users with disability doing some usability testing and highlighted major barriers that are not actually compliance issues. And so having users with disability informing those decisions as early in the process as possible, it can result in a much more inclusive and usable as well as accessible product at the end. So in short, as early as possible.
As early as possible, exactly. Embedding accessibility as early as possible. Everything we're saying. John, what's the approach at Moodle? Have you done like regular research or usability testing with people with disability?
Actually, we conduct user experience studies, usability studies. So our UX team perform those studies. They come from various background within the Moodle community. Sometimes they have a role of students, or trainers, or admins. However, it's quite hard for us to get participants from uh, with disabilities. So it's quite a challenge for us. So yeah, it's something that we really want to get, to look into in our future studies.
No,
So
that's great. Um,
I,
I'm just going to
maybe
go. Yeah, sorry, John. Sorry.
I'm thinking if we could I think it's gonna be a good idea to partner with digital advocacy, advocacy groups such as OZeWAI, or digital accessibility group, or leverage our IIP membership to um, uh, involve the people with disabilities in our UX studies.
No, that's a great idea, and we're here to help. Definitely, we can, especially through OZeWAI, to try and get the users that you need, the diverse users for the testing. So we've got a question in the chat. I've been very curious and have asked this question to many. How do organisations identify their customer base with accessible that need that with accessibility needs and inform research around it? So tying it back, do they tie it back to a business strategy? Juanita, did you have something that you'd like to share to that question about identifying the customer base that they can test with, basically?
Yeah, there's a few ways you can approach that. First of all, it's always good to have an open channel where folks with disabilities can actually raise issues and actually create community around your products. Google does this well. Google actually has a Google group of folks with disabilities. And, whenever they make a change that, takes away a feature that folks were using a lot, they definitely talk about it, and it becomes a huge thread. And that's a
Yes.
great way to get feedback. Another way, so creating communities with your customers, around accessibility. In terms of numbers, you can't legally do that, at least in the US. And I think it's not advised around the world for privacy reasons. However, if you want to get some semblance of something, you could probably use something like Microsoft Clarity, and it actually tracks click and keyboard actions. And keyboard actions could be an indicator that somebody's using assistive technology, and that's completely anonymized data, so you're not getting any personal information, but you are seeing the drop-off points when folks actually cannot complete a workflow, and that's completely free. So you can just embed that into your sites and such. Another way is, just sending out surveys and making sure that they're accessible and soliciting feedback. However, you're never going to get an actual number. And, you don't need one, because accessibility and accessible applications have so many other benefits that it doesn't really matter if it's, if you have 20 customers with disabilities, or, at that one time, or, most of your customers are customers with disabilities. The thing is, a disability is a state and time, because at some point in everybody's life, folks will acquire a disability more likely than not. If you live to the age of 75, 1 in 2 people will have a disability. And how many, folks in older age segments do you serve? If you actually know that information, if you know you serve a market of a lot of folks who are over 75, then 1 in 2 of those folks will have a disability. So, you can get it from demographic data, you can get it from, heat mapping, you can get it from asking your customers, to share any information they'd like to share, or to create communities with people with disabilities and solicit that feedback. But ultimately, at the end of the day, just doing it by default actually probably would be more beneficial to your organization for many more reasons than it's just the right thing to do.
Yeah, and I think there's also an aspect of sharing what you're already doing. So if you are running usability testing, make sure that the whole process of your usability testing process, whether it's getting consent or whether it's, using Zoom or Teams, test that first internally if you can, to make sure that that process is accessible, and then share that. In your request for people to join, or to participate or to give feedback, and say, and provide what you already have in place, so that they don't have to ask, and then you just have to ask the extra. We put at the bottom in our calls out here for us professionals, let us know what you need to communicate fully in this event, or this session. But we would also already provide that, we're going to record, you can watch it later, you can turn the captions on, so tell people what you have already, and you'll probably find, oh, they're already thinking about accessibility. I actually want to work with them now. I want to do some, I'm going to actually do that usability testing with them, because I don't have to I don't have to ask all the time, because they're already sharing things with me. So do you have any other advice as well?
Yeah, I was just thinking about like metrics that could be used from an internal perspective. So like in your usability testing research, having kind of metrics on how many users were able to complete a task. So referring back to those, but yeah, obviously there are data and privacy restrictions if you were doing anything like using external users. But if we can rely on some internal usability testing results. But yeah, you shouldn't really need metrics. It is just the right thing to do. And yeah, it's already been mentioned. Sorry, my mind's gone blank. I just
That's
had
all right.
Brain fart moment.
No, all good. Well, we can, hopefully we've answered your question there, Sushumna. I think that's how, if I pronounce that incorrectly, I do apologize. But hopefully we've answered that in a way to provide you with some options. So with that kind of metrics, we do have a question here about measuring and tracking maturity, though, accessibility maturity across an organization. Jun, do you do that at Moodle at the moment? Do you have like a baseline of how, and kind of a roadmap across the organization, or is it still really more the product that you're working to?
It's still something we're working on. So yeah, I've read about the accessibility maturity model. I would like to implement that within the Moodle product, within the Moodle LMS product, and then hopefully scale it to the other products and the organization. Yeah.
It's a wonderful tool. Through AbilityWorks, we have actually run it through a federal government, and the whole federal government is now got a roadmap ahead. So it is really worthwhile, and it's interesting because it doesn't mention WCAG. It talks about a changing culture. And I know there's a couple of people on the call that are already starting to implement it as well. Juanita, have you done some work around like measuring maturity, accessibility maturity across an organization?
Oh, yes, quite a bit actually. And the thing is, you can do it in an organizational study, but really, when you get down to it, it actually might make sense to do maturity audits of teams, or parts of an organization, because a lot of organizations, especially large ones, operate in silos, and then kind of use that to create composite metrics. And to talk a little bit about tracking and gaining metrics for business cases, but also for maturity and such, you have to have a good way to do it is to have a data ecosystem. And what you can do is actually try to find integrations for different products. So if you use Azure DevOps for your ticket tracking and such, what's your time? How many of those findings that are being found from accessibility audits getting into the backlog? How many of those? How long is it taking for those to get actions? At what point are you actually then just moving to a whole new tool, or you're doing a major redesign? Because then that affects the stickiness of the accessibility work you've already done. Right down to who's opening communications emails related to accessibility and such. You can get customer metrics that way and just feed it into dashboards for your leadership. And if you work in a larger organization, you have automation and data science teams, they would love to work on a project like this. Usually I would just recruit volunteers and get them to kind of help build out the system, because you can use it for other things too, not just accessibility. And people do want to develop integrations between systems, and Zapier is an excellent tool to kind of help facilitate that if you don't have as robust of a developer team that can work on it. But yeah, I do believe in data ecosystems in helping you get the metrics you need to kind of help the organization move to greater maturity.
No, that's great. And Zoe, do you have come back if you've got anything else to add to that around about the maturity and assessing maturity? Any tips and tricks to help that along?
Yeah, I think it can be a little bit overwhelming knowing where to start, but having those models such as the W3, I mean, that isn't the only maturity model out there. There are quite a number of different ones, all kind of slightly tracking different things, but cover with the same aim, basically. And that W3 model as well, you can kind of tweak it to your own needs and requirements, but having something that you can have a baseline from.
Yeah.
So knowing where you are currently is key in knowing how to progress. So you can't improve something if you don't know your current state. So these frameworks and maturity models are great to benchmark where you are. They facilitate a kind of framework that can be used from different parts of the organization, and also help with like resource allocation and prioritization. But there's some great models out there. I can put a few of those in the chat that might be useful, and have different key areas and different levels that they have. Yeah. Sorry, another brain fart moment. Yeah, I think that was
That's great.
Yeah.
And look, anyone else that if you've got a question, please put it in the chat, or maybe even put your hand up if you'd like to actually talk through it. But we're going to keep moving. We are over halfway through already. We've still only got like really half an hour or so left. So if you do need to stretch, we're going to keep going. But if you need a stretch or grab something, feel free to go off and do that. Yes, we can all do our own stretches. But we're going to get into the next question. And I'm actually going to cover something that was asked while we were at UX Australia. We had our OZeWAI booth there, wonderful volunteers. And someone asked about navigating a siloed organization where QA want to automate WCAG testing, with the acceptance criteria. What kind of has anyone can kind of help with that? What do you think's improve or a way they could do that? Go, Juanita, please.
Yeah, so for a siloed organization, one of the coolest things you can do is kind of get all the champions together, because there are people who care about accessibility at different parts of the organization. And, folks in QA are great, because you do need a CI/CD pipeline with automated tools integrated. You also need your functional manual QA to know something about accessibility. You need accessibility engineers. Cybersecurity funny enough, is actually one of the best allies for your accessibility team because A, they understand they've had to make the same sorts of arguments across the organization, and B, you can't have a secure application if it's not accessible. So and design tends to be a great advocate for accessibility because they have that usability lens. And so you can find, folks just everywhere that really want to make a difference. And you get those folks together and you make a comprehensive program and you communicate broadly about what you're doing and you try to get folks involved. So in-person events, I know I'm a big proponent of remote first working, but if you do have an on-site office, having folks come in, just voluntarily to do activities like an accessible escape room, the one that's offered by Accessible Community, for instance, or an empathy awareness lab where you can kind of take a look at different assistive technologies and such. Some sort of like different accessibility focused events. We also at Navy Federal supported for many years the Best Buddies Walk, which was really great for folks because they had this employment program and we actually hired a few of the Best Buddies. So a different aspect of the accessibility community as well. And so people will find places where they want to, build community around accessibility. When you build that community, it becomes a powerful force, even in a siloed organization, because then people start kind of giving you information, kind of behind the scenes, and then you can really get stuff done.
Exactly. Find your allies in your organization. There's always someone out there that is interested in bringing more of the accessibility in. Just make sure that, you're supporting each other, I guess. So have you seen any tips or tricks in that place as well? How to kind of automate QA? Do you have an approach that maybe you could share?
Automating QA.
Yeah. Have you seen that done or is it?
Yeah, I've seen it done. But I was kind of going to refer back to the whole like siloed part and how you can feel less isolated if you feel like you're a lone voice in the accessibility community. So there are some amazing meetups, free resources out there of other allies that may be isolated within an organization or a company, where you can get together and share tips and present on different topics or issues that you may be facing so that you can share lived experiences, tips and tricks that have worked for you within your organization. And so, and nationally here in Australia, there's pretty much one in every major city. So if you just do a search, an internet search of digital accessibility meetups, you'll see a whole list of them there. And that's kind of what I did when I first started in this industry. And I joined them all. And it was amazing. And it doesn't take you long to realize how inclusive and supportive the accessibility community is, not just here in Australia, but internationally. And it doesn't take long to get to know people, and everybody has each other's back, and we're more than happy to share anything that we know can help.
Yeah, and look at this. That's one of the main aims of OZeWAI too. Is we're here for that networking and the connections. If you haven't already, just jump into the pre-survey that came out with your registration and tell us what topics you'd like to hear, and we will gather and also share if you've got someone who is doing something really well that we should have on our panel. We've got a wonderful community globally, and we are flexible enough to actually bring people in. Initially, Juanita, you're in New York, I think, when we had you on last time. And our next session, in a couple of weeks about accessible mobile and apps, we've got someone from Holland. So we have a later time zone for Australia. So we're very flexible. And look, maybe that's another workshop that we need to do, or a way that, if you join OZeWAI, we do have a group, a Google group that you can actually have those discussions as well, and support each other. What about you, John? What have you seen, across, do you have silos, or is everyone kind of working really well together in their teams? What's the approach that you have at Moodle?
I think in terms of silo, the silo would be between product teams, I think, because we kind of work, we don't get to interact with each other with the other product teams. So, for example, LMS have their own thing, are doing their own thing. The model apps are doing their own thing.
Yeah.
And one thing that I think we that could bridge that those gaps would be we recently established our accessibility champions initiative. So each team will have a representative who's passionate about accessibility, and we will be um, who will be advocating for the team's accessibility efforts to ensure that accessibility is embedded in their process. And then in every sprint, we do sprint showcases. So we kind of want to do that as well. We'll have a catch up of how we are doing, how we are progressing in terms of our team's accessibility efforts. Yeah, so something like that.
It's great. And I think, just little things too in your team. As I said, what's an accessibility tip that you could share with your team today? What's something new that you've learned? Because I'm always learning something new, which is great, even from this session as well. Yeah. So John, just back on you, the costs. Let's talk about costs and money, right? Because even though we know accessibility is about people, but you still have to kind of drive that understanding. What are the initial costs up front? What's the benefit? And I know, Juanita, you've done some work on this, so we'll get to you at the end, I think. But John, have you noticed a difference in having a more accessible product, what that means for maybe, more purchasing, or, what kind of benefits have you seen?
Yeah, first is when we started when we started doing audits, accessibility audits, um, the initial cost was basically what we had to pay for our audit provider. Um, but I think that the effect is that we have more awareness. We've
Hmm.
always been trying to build Moodle according to HTML standards, according to ARIA standards, if necessary. But starting since we had the audit, what I observed is that we have more awareness about accessibility. So we are more conscious in making sure that when we are reviewing someone's work, we also consider accessibility. So, so yeah, and then of course, as I mentioned earlier, we have to provide formal proof of our
Yeah.
conformance to for our potential clients. So that's I think having more revenue. I think I'm not very familiar with how much revenue we get, but yeah, I think it put Moodle in a better position in against the competition, basically.
Yeah, no, that's great. What about you, Zoe? What have you seen, like, people convincing people about the initial costs up front, like maybe even just doing that audit? What are the benefits of that, rather than thinking of it as a hurdle?
Yeah, I think again, it's like presenting the business case for it. And
Hmm.
people do need to see is if there's a benefit in terms of business and revenue. So having clear metrics on that that can drive that argument home. Also, kind of like gamification as well. You can use competitors as an incentive. If there's any kind of metrics out there on how competitors have performed, that sometimes can be a good motivation as well.
Yep.
Competitors within the same industry specifically. So yeah.
No, that's great. What about, and now, Juanita, you've done actually got some metrics around this, and the numbers around the benefits. You mentioned it a little bit earlier. Can you give us a little bit more detail on how you did that?
Yeah, so basically I took in, I factored in a bunch of different costs based on, a very conservative estimate of labor rates, loaded labor rates. And so in order for an accessibility issue to be remediated, it has to go through a number of different hands, not just the developer, but for the project planners. It needs to, the managers have to spend some time, reporting up on those issues and creating decks. You have the accessibility auditors that are, reviewing and, giving feedback and guidance. You have, QA folks that also test any sort of code changes. All of those costs lead to about, 2,400 per issue. There's also opportunity costs that are baked in there because your developers, when they're working on accessibility issues, they can't work on the cool new features that your business wants them to work on because they're stuck retrofitting things that already exist. So the thing is, embedding an accessibility engineer actually has returns about $100 per every dollar spent. So it is a really powerful way to, because an accessibility engineer, a good one, can prevent about 80% of the issues up front. And I've seen this work out in practice. I was working with a team that had accessibility engineers embedded, and they had a full audit of a whole website. It had maybe a handful of issues after the audit, and there wasn't this was the audit after the redesign, so they had all new functionality, and so they developed a very good process. That was a very mature team, and a non-mature team had on average 6 issues per component.
Right.
So the thing is, you can really you have a lot of cost savings just building that up front and having those processes in place. And, I understand the rush to like get new features out the door, but if you have to retrofit those features, you're losing profit margin, because those features are only good for a certain period of time. And if you're spending half your time retrofitting it to make it accessible and then having to redo that work again, just a few months later, it just doesn't make sense. So what I recommend, especially if you do large scale projects a lot, is to not let things linger in the backlog, to actually have a standing remediation team that works across your products to actually remediate issues. That's just a great way to ensure that things are actioned on quickly, and then you have folks freed up to actually work on new features, and obviously embedding accessibility engineers at the beginning of those phases so that you don't have issues go down the road.
Zoe, do you have anything to add to that as well?
Yeah, I think having accessibility checkpoints all throughout the process, the development life cycle, that greatly reduces inaccessible features being released and having to be retrofitted. And then again, the design system. So having an accessible design system that kind of eliminates a lot of those issues, saving massive amounts of time and of course money. Time is money. And also making sure that each role knows their responsibilities. And so if they're addressing their checklist and their definition of done, less and less issues are going to be introduced throughout that product and feature, to the point where in an ideal world, very little needs to be addressed at sign-off stage.
No, that's a good point. And Jen, have you seen that as well now that you are improving the audits? Are you seeing that there's less work that has to come back for retrofitting?
Yep. Although there are some, so basically, Moodle's a huge system, and of course, when we have to when we release new features, sometimes there's especially if we recently we shifted to Bootstrap 5 from Bootstrap 4, so and then we had our accessibility audit, and we have more issues now. But of course, hopefully it will get better as we go.
It's totally a journey, you're right. And a great quote from Andrew Downey, writing good standards-based code certainly doesn't cost more than writing inaccessible code. So,
Yeah, definitely.
it's just a fact, right? Just write
Yeah.
good code.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I'm sorry, if I may add, after our
Yeah,
initial
please.
then our for future releases, there were less issues found in our succeeding audits, and then we changed significantly the UI. Then we get more items raised in the audit. So yeah, it's kind of like a roller coaster at the moment. But I really hope that we can see less and less issues getting reported in our audits in the future.
Yeah, it's great. And what about your team, or the people that are working on different teams in Moodle? Do you have people that are do you kind of assess people for their roles? When you've got candidates for new developers or designers or whatever, do you have that in your job description? How do you do some assessments of people's understanding of accessibility in their roles? Are you part of that process at all?
Um, I've been invited to the a developer interview once, and then yeah, that's one of the questions I raised if they have familiarity with accessibility, and a lot of them don't really have are not familiar with accessibility, or they have limited accessibility knowledge. So, but it's not really a blocker for us because we have a policy of writing of in our in our development process. Accessibility is also a must. So
Mm,
they have to learn along the way. We in our peer review process, in our review processes, we also review about the accessibility of the code. So they also learn
yeah.
some and get better.
No, it's great. And Zoe, have you seen, some any tips and tricks for people who are in, screening or understanding, when you're hiring people for roles, and their understanding of accessibility?
Yeah, I've never been on the interviewer side, always on the interviewee, but I can
Yeah,
definitely share my experience and of how I was screened.
yeah,
And I think was really great ways of screening. So maybe getting the candidate to do a mini audit, for example. Obviously, you're not going to give them a full, a full AAA level WCAG audit on the most complex
no,
product, but just a mini snapshot gives you an idea of their knowledge. And because as we all know, WCAG, it can be quite subjective.
hmm
And there's different ways of interpreting some of the more complex grey areas. And so it's a great way of understanding how that candidate is working through some of the issues and how they apply them, and also whether they are aware of more best practice issues. So I think that was one really great kind of interviewee experience, and
yeah,
it just does reveal quite a lot. You can also ask a candidate to do kind of design reviews, maybe code reviews to get a level of the technical expertise. But I think along with capability and technical expertise in whatever role they're being interviewed for, personality and whether they'll fit into the culture of the team that's something that's more fixed than skills. Skills can be learned,
yeah.
and so having kind of an inclusive approach to your role as a person, I would say is really key in finding good candidates.
I think, yeah, anyone that's, open for learning more, because you are always learning more in the accessibility
Always.
space, always. What about you, Anita? What have you seen as a good way to, look at candidates, or, or different parts of basically hiring people with accessibility?
So throughout my career, I've hired a lot of folks. I had a team of 12 at Navy Federal, and just I've had to hire folks for different projects for different clients. And so for technical roles, I actually had a test. I had someone actually build a website, and it actually met all the WCAG 2.0 success criteria. And then what I did was I went through and I just broke it in certain ways. And then I created an answer key, and I showed which ones could actually be found by automated tools and which ones couldn't. And that actually it kept grading very consistent. And there were only a certain subset of things that were broken. So, that really kind of reduced the amount of time that folks would need to spend on the audit. Then I would give that to candidates, and if they scored above a 75%, they would get an interview. And I found that was a really good way to find engineers. Now, for other roles, the thing is, I don't believe in just, having one person doing everything. So for roles that are things that are, communications based, I look at how well they write, how good they are at making connections with people. For folks that are doing things like for the vendor team, really a key thing I wanted somebody who could really keep a level head, and somebody who was really good with like data, because those things really stand out when you're talking to, aside from having an accessibility engineer in those discussions. Those are things that kind of stand out when you're talking to a vendor, that the contract, that you have a good organization system, that you also are very good at finding alternatives if that vendor doesn't make their products accessible, that you're good at analyzing whether or not, and reading between the lines, whether or not they actually base their VPAT off of an independent qualified third party. So different skills require different things, but always make the hiring process accessible. And I don't believe in a lot of the tenets of professionalism, because I don't think that they're accessible. So I don't require, HR has made me like have them share video, which is fine for like I'll do that for a couple of minutes, but in a second interview, I wouldn't really require it. And I try not to require it when I don't have to. I try to, if I'm able to, send the questions in advance. Make sure that if they need any assistance for the interview process, that is that I get that up front. And I really try to make sure that a diverse degree of folks can kind of enter the team. And when I say diverse, I also don't necessarily believe that personality fit should be paramount, because otherwise you have a team made up of like-minded people, and that's not a team that succeeds. You need a team of diverse folks, because if everybody is the same, then you're just going to get a lot of people who listen to you and not a lot of people who help you create great processes.
Yeah, and just thinking about, as you get a new member in the team, working to some of those approaches of like ways of working, understanding that some people need to be that there's a flexibility there of how people work, whether it's someone collecting their kids from school, or whether they have other access needs as well. Then sometimes it might take more time. So that ways of working just puts everyone on the same page to understand where everyone else is coming from, rather than an assumption that everyone's coming from the same place. So that's really good. And I guess there's another question here that, and it's kind of like a little bit out of the box, but where would you find good candidates? Where would they come from for accessibility roles? What kind of places could you look for them? And Juanita, I'll start with you with that one.
I follow the ABH principle, always be hiring. So the thing is, when I go to conferences, I automatically am making a Rolodex of where I think people would fit. And I actually had a list of folks because recruiters can't help you find people. They aren't really experienced in the space. Not many of them are. And so I would actually give them lists of people. This is who I want for this role. If they're available, get them or somebody like them. I would always try to leverage my LinkedIn network. The Slack channel has over 10,000 folks on there, local meetups and such. And so it'd always be kind of thinking, oh, this is where this person's strengths are. If I have that kind of need, I'm keeping that person in the back of my mind. And I literally do have people lists that I kind of go through. So if I need to work on a project, I start looking for folks and I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep that person in the back of my mind for a project. Some of the people that are on my team, my former team at Navy Federal, I had on my list for a couple of years.
Yeah. Doesn't happen overnight, does it? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And it's also the OZeWAI newsletter too. We put any jobs. Ricky does an amazing job of scouring for the jobs that are relevant for accessibility. But if you have any, please send them to us as well for OZeWAI. We're always open to receive articles and material and links and resources. What about you, Zoe? Where do you think you can find good candidates?
Yeah, I think the Ali Slack channel, there's like a job channel within that. LinkedIn, also kind of disability advocacy groups and organizations, and many kind of skilled candidates can come from people with lived experience of disability as well. So reaching out to those. And I also think like internal capabilities as well. So obviously, accessibility teams are usually pretty small within large organizations. So being able to uplift and increase capability from within is a great way of kind of filling in maybe some of those gaps. So things like having a champions program, and that way teams across like all the different roles can become champions and increase their knowledge so that then that can be specifically applied to their role. That's another way of helping bridge those gaps and increase and upskill internally.
Yeah, no, that's great. What about you, John? How have you seen hiring people with the accessibility skills, or is it more training? Do you upskill in house? What kind of approaches has Moodle used?
Yeah, at the moment, it's still about upskilling in-house. But yeah, I think I think in the future, in the next few months, we'll be hiring another accessibility specialist. So I'm really keen to get your inputs here.
Yeah. No, excellent. And send it to us. Make sure we've got it in the newsletter for you. Hey.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, we're down to like the 9 minutes to go. I'm just going to open it to anyone on the call. Anyone would like to like just comment or share a question to the panelists themselves. You can either put it in the chat or you can put your hand up and we can take the call now that you've like listened to a lot of the other aspects. Is there anything that we've missed that you really want to kind of touch on? Right. What about, oh yeah, sorry, yes.
Sorry, I couldn't get the hand up thing to raise for some reason. I couldn't.
Okay.
Sorry
Joseph,
about
is
that.
that?
Yes, it's Joseph.
Yes.
Yes.
Hey, Joseph, thank
Oh,
you.
wait, it's down here. Okay.
Nice to have
So
you
let me just
from the US.
it's nice to be here. It's, you're one of the, I know it's a very different time zone and different regulatory environment, but it's kind of there's not a lot of people that do the online accessibility meetups. So it's nice to stop by and, just see what's going on and gain more information because I
Thank
work
you,
in the
Joseph.
field a little bit.
Do you have a question for the panelists for us?
Yes, I did. So, someone mentioned that, it's really hard to kind of, look for people in this field in terms of, a lot of this. I was just wondering if we could have some more perspective from maybe, I mean, I think she mentioned, networking in terms of getting people for roles. I was just wondering if she had some information on maybe a little more on the inverse, really. Like, how would you go about looking for a job in the accessibility field? If
Yeah.
you're
Juanita, would you like to answer that? Like looking for a job? That's a great question.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joseph.
You know what really helps, just from a hiring manager's perspective, what folks, whenever I saw a portfolio, I'm like, yes, portfolio. And I go and look at the accessibility, I'm like, oh. But if you have an accessible portfolio, like portfolio samples of things that you've made as an accessibility engineer, that's really great. Because then if I can see clean code that you've made, I would be, much more comfortable, bringing you in for an interview. If you write a lot on LinkedIn, that really helps. That makes candidates stand out to me because I can see their writing quality. I can see what they're thinking about. I can see how they communicate. And those are all very key aspects to any sort of accessibility type role because you have to persuade at the same time you're doing, if that makes sense. Going to meetups and making connections is also really cool, is a really good way. I saw a few folks that were in the Ali DMV group actually came together and they wrote a book together. And now it's one of the top sellers on Amazon. So, you don't know who you're going to meet where. And so you just need to put yourself out there and just try to meet every single accessibility person and form good relationships. Some of my closest friends are in the accessibility space, and now we work together all the time.
Yeah.
And it's kind of fun to work with your friends. So it's you'll find your people and you'll do like great things together. But it just starts with putting yourself out there online or putting yourself out there in person if you can. Really makes a difference.
Yeah. Work shows, right? Zoe, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was just thinking like a lot of conferences these days. I was thinking of CSUN in particular. They had little badges saying I'm open for roles. So if you go to conferences, that's a great way of networking and reaching out to people, saying that you're available and looking. So that's another way I can think of.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's
I would like to add to that. You can go to a lot of conferences for free, and the secret is you just start presenting at them. And if, here's the offer I make to anybody who wants to get into speaking. I will partner with you on things if you need to get your name out there, and you can ask your mentors to do that. But partnering with someone is a great way to start getting into speaking. And then when you have some good presentations out there, you start building a really good speaking portfolio, and then you can kind of go anywhere. And it becomes a really great way to get known in the space and find work, but also find your people.
yeah, exactly right. And Jun, do you have anything to add to that?
Um, not really.
Getting a role.
I'm really learning. I'm really
How
absorbing here a lot. So it's
you
really
just want to
good.
hire now to build the team. Yeah. Anything you'd like to add? Like,
Yeah,
what would you look for?
I really like the Juanita's perspective of checking their work. So we at Moodle we also have a lot of applicants um that provide their portfolio, and I also do that. Like I check
Yeah.
their work, if it's functional and if it's accessible. So sometimes I also get turned off well, from such candidates. But yeah.
No, thank you. And hopefully that's answered your question there, Joseph. We're going to start to wrap up. Thank you
Yes,
for
that did.
joining us
Thank you very
today.
much.
But keep the
Yes.
conversation going. We're a community that we share things on LinkedIn. You've got connections with people. If you're we actually do have members from overseas, OZeWAI, but check our newsletter as well. Just to finish off, Jun, what's one final thing that you'd like to share? What's one takeaway that you'd like to share with the group about embedding accessibility? One thing to keep always in mind.
Uh, well, I think what's important is to uh, try to embed accessibility right from the beginning and not consider it as an afterthought, because it's more efficient if we have accessibility embedded starting from the design stage, and it's more costly to do it if we already released the product. So yeah, as much as possible, have a shift left mindset of embedding accessibility right at the start of the development process.
That's great. Thanks, Jun. What about you, Zoe? What's one final takeaway for the people on the call today?
I think it's easy to feel overwhelmed
Mm.
when it comes to embedding accessibility. So think of small incremental progress rather than perfection, and think that every step is a step more accessible than where you were before. Celebrate the wins, basically.
Yes, yes, exactly. Thank you. And do a few things yourself. Make sure that your documents are accessible. Make sure little things that you can do yourself that people will start to look at and say, oh, okay, I need to do that, and to learn something new each day, right? And some training. Juanita, what's one of the final takeaway from you?
Come in with a plan. So the thing is, if you do enough advocacy work, someone might say, okay, well then make our company accessible. And then you don't want to be the dog that caught the car.
Yeah.
You want to do your research, figure out what your next steps are, and then figure out how you're going to build, an accessibility program. And if there's not a process out there, make one up. The thing is, the space is open for new voices, and we need new people figuring out solving these problems. We don't need the same old ideas.
Exactly. Thank you. All right. Well, on that, I'm just going to just share a couple more things about OZeWAI. Please join. It's $50 for our advocacy level. It helps support us to get to partner events like we did with UX Australia. We're growing our benefits. Look for that in our newsletter coming hopefully very soon about all our growing benefits. Subscribe to our newsletter, which is amazing. Ricky does a great job. Again, we've got other events coming up. We've got one on the 11th of September, different time zone, obviously, and we do the recording. And if you are in this space and you're interested in volunteering, we're always open for committee members, and there's other projects that we will be. We work on advocacy projects. We're always looking for people to join our community. So thank you, everyone. And thank you for those that joined us today and registered. Thank you, Jun, Zoe, and Juanita. Appreciate it. I'm going to stop the recording.